All right, so let us have a look at that homework. Just going to get to the place of the homework. All right, so I'm going to share the PowerPoint. Share PowerPoint. All right, and we were dealing with naming of numbers after our place values. Anyone that is unable to see the PowerPoint that says naming numbers, please type now on the chat. As well, if you have any questions during the lesson, please just type it in the chat. I do have it open next to me, so I'll be able to keep an eye on it and answer questions as we go along. All right. All right, so naming numbers, I gave you the homework, and it was 4 things. So here are the answers. 34,245.9. Please note that the 34 has a hyphen and the 45 has a hyphen. Thanks, Jana. Number 2, this was a bit of a trickier one. So it's 100,000 because that's the group of 3. You need to have an and here, even though there is no value in the 100 slot. And the rules state that if you have 100, you then always put the and after the 100. Because essentially you don't have a 100 number, but you would if there was something there, you still need to put this and in. So it's and 5.25. Remember, any numbers after the point, you just name them individually. So here, 44.44. Please note the difference in spelling of 40. There is no U in 40. So 44 also hyphenated. And then just to give you a nice big one, so you have 999. 99 is hyphenated. So 999, and it's over there, so it's 1,000. Then we go into these 3, 999. That 99 again is hyphenated. Point, and then those, as we say, just after the decimal point, is 0.999. Now remember I said last time, we are going to be using points because in your later courses, it's going to be important to use a decimal point, not a decimal comma. In foundation, they won't necessarily mark you wrong, but this is the time that it will be useful to try and get in that habit, and then you'll have that habit for later. Next thing we're going to be moving on to, similar to place value, is multiplying and dividing by powers of 10. Now, all of this is still week 1 work. So you would have hopefully remembered from last week, if you were here, if you weren't here, this will be slightly new, but that's fine, that if you have a number such as this, 2,350, this 2 here actually represents the number 2,000. The 3 represents the number 300, the 1 represents the number 10, and the 5 represents the number 5 because it's in the units column. So if you're asked for the value of this number, these are the items you are looking at. If you're looking for the place value of these numbers, it is the thousands, hundreds, tens, or units. Now, when you're multiplying and dividing by powers of 10, we know that there are 10 units in a 10, 10 hundreds in 100, 10 hundreds in 1,000, and as it goes along. So there are tens that move along each way to make it go up a place value or down a place value. So you remember this as well. So I'm going to be using this as a base, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop these rings off just to leave the heading. So one more time, just so that you know, this is where I'm getting these headings from: 100,000, 10,000, 1,000, 110 units, decimal point, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths, and 100 thousandths. All right. Now, what happens if you take a nice simple number? 5. All right. No one is out of their depth when dealing with a number 5. Now, if I say to you, I want to take 5 and multiply it by 10, what is going to happen? Well, we know very well, hopefully, that 5 times 10 gives me an answer of 50. Now, how do you represent 50 in this? You have a 5 and a 0. Well, what about if I wanted to multiply by 100? Well, then I'd get 500. 500. Well, what happens if I'm not multiplying? What happens if I'm dividing? What happens if I've 5 divided by 10? Well, hopefully again, you aren't going to strain yourself. You'll know it's 0.5. Well, but you know that. 5 over 10, it's a half. Half is a decimal fraction, 0.5. But let's try and understand this in terms of place value, what we're actually doing. So when we're multiplying, if we multiply by 10, we are taking the 5 and we're essentially moving it one place value to the left, being one place value larger than what it was initially. But I can't just have a number 5 in my tens column, because I always need to fill up the number, whether it's on the left-hand side, the bigger place values, or on the right-hand side, the smaller place values. I need to fill it up so that it meets my decimal point. That is why I need to add in this extra 0. And that is why if I multiply by 100 and got 500, I didn't just put in a 5 there and leave that blank, because I wouldn't know the difference between this 5 and this 5 if you just put a 5. That's why you need the extra zeros. So what would happen if I divide now? Well, very similar situation. So I'm going to make that slightly neater. So if I have my 5 here, and I'm now dividing by 10, I am moving my 5 this direction when I divide. So once again, that direction when multiplying, this direction when dividing. And I'm moving it over my decimal point, but only one place value am I moving it, because it's only 10. So now I can put the 5 over there. Okay, great. And I can remove him from there. But as I said with a 500, if you only have the 5, you are unable to determine what the difference is between this 5 and this 5. So yes, you're totally correct in that this is meeting up directly next to my decimal point, which is what I said. But there is no difference between that and that now. And that's a problem, because they're different numbers. So that is why we need to show that there are 0 units. And if there are 0 units here and nothing else that you see, there is nothing on that side. And we have to have our decimal points. So if we take 5 and we divide it by 1,000, well, my 5 is here. I'm going to move it 3 place values. 1 into tenths, 2 into hundredths, 3 into thousandths. Cool. I can get rid of it from there. But then in each of these, I need to first of all fill up until my decimal point. So I need a 0 there and I need a 0 there. There's my decimal point. And I need to show that there are no units or anything else on the left-hand side and therefore that is why I have that as my answer. So hopefully that makes total sense to you guys. If you've got issues, put it in the chat. So let's take a slightly more complex number, 15. Now, you might be laughing at me to say 15 isn't a complex number. Well, 15 is actually more complex than 5 because right now we've got numbers in more than one place value. So if I take 15 and I multiply it by 10, I'm not only going to be moving the 5 by one place value, I have to move the 10 as well by one place value. And everything will move the amount of place values that is required. 1 if it's 10, 2 if it's hundreds, 3 if it's thousands. So then, if that moves, the 5 moves 1 left, I put a 5 there. The 1 moves 1 left, I put a 1 there. Rule states I need to fill it up to the decimal point. That's why I put in the 0. Do I need to put in a 0.0 here? You know what? It's not wrong. However, there is a convention that states if you don't see a decimal point, then you know that there is nothing on that side of the decimals. So, to be totally honest, you don't need it. Now, what happens if I have my 15? So here's 15, and I want to divide by 1,000. Well, 15 is now going to be moving to the right, because dividing, we move to the right. But not just the 5, not just the 1, the whole number is moving. So the 5 is going to move 3 places, and the 1 is going to move 3 places. So you can actually identify it according to either one of the numbers because they're going to move as a whole. So if I have the 15, I'm going to move it 1 place, 2 places, 3 places to get this divide by 1,000. Okay, so I'm going to remove that, which means that my 5 is going to end up here. Now, if my 5 is over there, I know automatically that my 1 has to be there in the hundreds column. But in case you weren't sure, or in case you weren't following or something like that, let's count. 1, 2, 3. And that's why it ends up there. Now we've got to do the rule. Well, the rule states we've got to fill up to the decimal point, and if there's nothing on the left, we've got to put in a 0. 0, we filled up to my decimal point, and then my 0. So hopefully none of this is really bad for you guys. But if you can get the idea of moving it by place value, and if you move it past the decimal point, what do you do? Where do you put the zeros? How many zeros? You're going to make all your marks very easily. So let's start with a number something like this, 0.5. Let's even change up the order. Let's do divide first. 0.5, I'm going to just get some space here. 0.5 divided by 10. Let's go divide by 100. Let's go divide by 1,000. No, let's stay with 100. So if we divide by 100, we're moving to the left. So the 5 is moving 1, 2 places. So it's moving up to there. So here we have a 5. Therefore, we need a 0. We need a 0. We need our decimal point. And therefore, nothing on the left-hand side. What happens if we multiply by 1,000? Well, here we have 0.5. We're going to be moving to the right because multiplying, we move to the right. and we're moving by 3 places. Easily for you to know, it's the number of zeros. That's how many places we're moving. So 1, 2, 3. So we're going to end up over here. So there's my 5. I've got to fill up to my decimal point, 0, 0. And do I put a point and a 0 there? If you want to, but remember convention states if you see no decimal point, you assume that it's on the left-hand side of it. Great. Again, any questions, put it in the chat. So let's try one more complex number. So here we have values on the left and on the right. So let's try dividing again first. So let us divide by 100. Okay, that looks fine. So if we're dividing by 100, we are moving all the values 2 places to the right, which means this 5 is going to move along, the 8 is going to move along, the 7 is going to move along, and you're going to move it twice each. So this 6 is no longer here, it's going to be 2 places to the right. 6, 4, decimal point is decimal point, 1, 5, 8, 7. You see, everything has moved 2 places to the right. Not too bad. What happens if I multiply by 1,000? If I multiply by 1,000, everything is going to be moving 3 places to the left. So therefore, 1, 2, 3, we're going to end up over here with a new block of millions. So it's 6, 4, 1, 5, 8, 7. We've got to fill up to my decimal point, so we add in a 0. Great. Nothing too bad, nothing too complex. The problem is, in doing this, that you've got to know exactly where your place values are. So there are 2 ways of thinking about this. One is moving the values in place value, which is conceptually more correct. The other one is essentially moving the decimal point. So if I'm dividing by 100 here, I am making this value or this number 100 times smaller. So if I'm making it smaller, essentially I need to move this decimal point to the left. You'll say, but that sounds a little weird. Why am I doing that? Well, if I move my decimal point to the left, any numbers that were there become smaller. For example, I move my decimal point over there, and I now put it over there. This 5 is now after my decimal point, so it's no longer units, it is now tenths. So it's another way of interpreting which one you do. And you can therefore move it 2 places, so that my decimal point is there, and we notice we get the exact same answer. It doesn't matter which way you use. Conceptually, often it is easier to identify that you're moving the number left and right on a scale that is fixed, or you can fix the number and move the scale with a decimal point. That is totally up to you guys. In the notes on the website, I move the decimal point, but in the live lesson, I'm trying to show you the other option that requires a bit more explaining in moving the number. So totally up to you guys.